Stephen Street. I'm an intensive care specialist. I've been an intensive care specialist for 35 years and I'm the director of Organ Donation New Zealand. This organ donation is something that benefits everybody and that it's everyone's responsibility to talk about it and to participate in it, but it is not an obligation to donate. But I think it's something which benefits all of society, and it's something that all of society needs to talk about and needs to accept is a normal part of the end of life. It's a very unusual circumstance where people can become a donor. In New Zealand there are about 30,000 people a year who die, and only around 1 in 200 dies under circumstances where donation might be possible. To be a donor, you need to die in an intensive care unit whilst on a ventilator, so you are being artificially ventilated by a machine, and you are having that treatment because you have had something terrible happen to your brain quite suddenly. Usually this is bleeding in the brain from a rupture of an artery. So most commonly the person is well, does not have any symptoms or does not feel unwell, and suddenly has a rupture of an artery in the brain and a lot of blood goes into the brain under high pressure, and the person might have a headache briefly and then collapse and unconscious and difficulty breathing. Much less common is injury from direct injury to the head, such as a fall from a high building or a road crash. Almost all of the cases are brain death, and until 10 years ago in New Zealand all donors were from brain death. But recently, last 10 years, there has been also a smaller number of donors of people who are not brain dead. They have had very severe brain damage and will not survive, and their family understand and agree that ventilator should be taken away, but only if they die in a time which is not very long, so that the other organs are not damaged during the dying. And this is called donation after circulatory death. And it is important to know that the person is dead when the organs are removed, and it is important to know that treatment is withdrawn not because of organ donation, but because it is the right thing for the person. And donation is not discussed with the family until it is clear to everyone that the right thing is to withdraw treatment, because it is no longer in that person's best interest. This is just attitude research, not actual research. But if you look at, for example, the percent of people who write donor on their license, you find that in rich communities there is a higher percentage of people who write donor, and in poor communities a lower percentage. Across the whole country this average is about 54%, but it varies depending on the poverty or wealth of the community. So in some rich places it can be 60 or 70%, and in poor places maybe 30%. What people say they will do is not the same as what they actually do on the day. We find that people are if you like, more generous when the person is dying, and so they discuss organ donation more positively, regardless of their wealth or their education. Not many people will die under the circumstance where they could donate, but people who do wish to donate, and if they talk to their family about that, their family will usually agree to donate. And so it is helpful for that person, and it is helpful for their family to have a conversation about what they would like and why, so that there can be discussion and people can understand what the reasons are. These conversations help families to understand what the person wants. Decision is always made by the family. The family knows, usually, what that person would want. They also know what they think the person would want, because they know the person. They know what sort of person they are. And they also know what they want and why. When the person actually dies, everything is different. And people have different behaviour after the person's died than beforehand. This sounds like a difficult issue, but in practice, the entity that makes a decision is the family. Not one person, but the family. And this can be very unpredictable. Sometimes people who are faced with this question on the driver license, they don't want to have anything to do with organ donation, they just want a driver license. And the information that they have given to them is reasonable information, but there's no discussion, so they can't ask a lot of questions and talk about these things. It might lead you to have a conversation with the family, and I think that's a good thing, because there's better understanding between the family members. It's about 55–56%. It's very similar to the people who write on the driver license. Transplant in New Zealand is covered by our public health system, so people do not have to pay for the transplant or for the medication or the follow-up. This is just like any other health service. Now, this is available to people who are entitled to health services within the New Zealand public service system. So citizens and residents and some people who are from countries which are New Zealand dependencies and so on. But non-residents or non-citizens, it is not available. From the patient's point of view, there is no cost, and in the donation process there is no money that changes hands. So when somebody donates a kidney, they do not receive payment. Yes, and all the doctors and nurses in the country, in the intensive care units.
Is that hard for you?
It is hard for everyone. One of my friends who helps me to teach about organ donation used to say, if you don't have feelings about this, you're in the wrong job, or you should reduce your drug intake. Because of course everybody is affected by the grief of people around them. It's important to acknowledge that, but not be paralyzed by it. You acknowledge it, you share it, but you are not crippled by it. You have a job to do, and that job is to look after that family, look after the person who's dying, do that job well.